A man's man. Beowulf began in beginnings bold, yet humble. Even as a child, his charisma cowed men and women of all ages and social standings, but his life was not always charmed. Born out of wedlock as the offspring of a famous movie star, Edgetho, and his beautiful, would-be actress mistress, the squealing young babe was abandoned on the steps of St. Catherine's Cathedral to keep his creator's careers from carnage. With his voice, powerful as all his traits even in such reduced age, quickly summoned a strapping man, Hygelac, who, upon seeing Beowulf's manifest magnificence, resolved to raise the renounced boy himself. Hauling Beowulf, already a hefty 10 pounds, home with him to foster as his own, Hygelac mused on how he and his brothers had been looking for an heir to their kingdom, as grateful citizens oft called it. Some people threw around words like gang, but Hygelac, custodian of the courageous, detested such demeaning descriptions. He defended those who endured devoted to him, and if that involved less than lawful lengths, then so be it. Hygelac gazed upon the glowing guise of Beowulf and knew, without a shadow of doubt, that this young lad would last to be a limitless leader. As Beowulf grew, so did his fearsome force. By the age of merely 8, Beowulf had overpowered all the older bullies on the playground, reigning undefended against even 13-year-olds. He stood for honor and taught all the kindergartners that the sole decent demise was in combat. Beowulf's name became synonymous with gallantry, lion-heartedness, and potency, and he was known in all the schoolyards of Gaeland as Beowulf, the victor of the valiant. Sprouting to 5 feet by the tender age of 10, Beowulf easily reached 6 foot 4 inches as he entered his teenage years. He soared over his subordinates and sustained his string of successes with the ease of a man conceived to command. With a young man like Beowulf, the victor of the valiant, on the rise, the sleazy serpents that slunk the halls of Gaiad Central High School had no chance at survival. As Beowulf matured, he had no anxiety attracting the opposite sex. Women swooned at the sight of his bulging muscles and handsome locks. His shoulders were said to be sizable and sturdy enough to withstand the weight of the world twice over, and his famed fists were said to be firm enough to bury even the burliest bullet with one blow. On the eve of Beowulf's 18th birthday, Hygelac, his uncle in all but blood, honored him with a striking celebration, proclaiming him champion of their gang and all but ensuring that Beowulf would one day succeed him. Hygd, wife of Hygelac and proxy parentage of Beowulf, hugged her adopted son with tears misting her eyes at the astounding achievements of his aptitude. Meanwhile, in the next town over, a place by the name of Denmark, there lived another gang, ruled by a renowned Hrothgar and more immense than even the Geats. This group had once been the most prosperous in all the lands, but an appalling atrocity had arisen against them just 12 years heretofore. Just after Hrothgar had completed construction in a new, glorious tavern, Herat, for his men, a rival gang, which was described to have had talents for tunneling terribly into local businesses, instigated impairing Hrothgar's danes. The gang would tear Hrothgar's people limb from limb and leave them mutilated corpses in Herat as a harking of hostility for Hrothgar's heritage. They slowly slayed Hrothgar's men one by one, and any man who combated the beast was left lifeless, or less. This rival retained no remorse, roused no regret. Ghastly and grisly, the gang was called Grendel. As the Danes had always been on good terms with the Geats, Beowulf knew of their troubles. Upon his 18th birthday, Beowulf, the victor of the valiant, verified to further validate his valor by voyaging to Denmark and challenged the leader of the Grendel, a man more monster than man named Cain. Cain, the patron of pain, fought bare-fisted, and therefore Beowulf determined that he should also face the menace without any weapons other than his implausible power, as that was the only decent course of action. Beowulf was welcomed into the camaraderie of the distressed Danes with open arms. Beer poured out sloshing over mugs and onto tables, as Hrothgar celebrated the surfacing of a savior at last. Beowulf drank bounteously, fully able to hold his liquor, and regaled those rogues with renditions of his many triumphs back in Gaeland. He told of his expedition to destroy all the depraved drug dealers infringing on the Geats' profit. He entranced the men with his spirited stratagem to strike down a dissenter who sought to slaughter his uncle for power. He even mentioned his exploits in high school, of easily escalating to the epitome of his sea serpent classmates with his authority. The only Dane who didn't awe over these sagas was Unferth, the mucus of the timorous. The man, if he could even be called that, had worked his way up through the ranks of the gang as a sniveling coward, with deceptions and defamations and indubitably nothing decent. Scoffing at Beowulf with unparalleled audacity, Unferth only ensured his insignificance to that great man, and one sharp word from the tongue of Beowulf, the victor of the valiant, shut Unferth's mouth instantly. A few hours later, all the Danes were drunk enough to sing, but a sinister stroke swiftly silenced them all. 36 heads turned simultaneously toward the door, Beowulf fearlessly facing forward. The door swung inward, hitting the wall with a crack, and a dark figure darted inside, stopping to stand a few paces in front of Beowulf. Beowulf instantly recognized the slime as Cain, the patron of pain. He had long, lanky, lackluster black hair that fell well past his shoulders and obscured his face. A long dragon tattoo wound its way up his arm and around his neck as if it were strangling him. He hunched like an old man, but Beowulf could coherently see the clarity of his brawn. This man was the groundbreaker of the gruesome Grendel, and he was surely no scrawny swine. "You are Beowulf?" his coarse voice inquired, meaty mitts clenching. Beowulf merely bobbed his head in the bearing of the brute. The other inhabitants of the bar had cleared the floor, shuffling into seams and slinking into side rooms that still had scrutiny of the skirmish. That was fine by Beowulf, though. He'd always known it would ultimately come down to him and Cain. The man made no haste in launching himself at Beowulf, a savage snarl slashing through his throat. Beowulf escaped the assault, and the contest commenced. Beowulf erected immense and impressive, encompassing an enormous allocation of the area with his extended stance as Cain slunk around him, essentially scampering on all fours like an animal. Cain lashed out at Beowulf with his hands like hooks, digging up chunks of Beowulf's flesh with his unkept fingernails. He caught Beowulf around the arms and neck, one specific slice, stimulating a sharp sting from the mighty warrior. Beowulf, in his turn, swung around at Cain with his fists, formulating clutches for him. One of Beowulf's positioned punches pounded Cain in the stomach and sent him soaring back into the tables. Ferociously flinging himself forward toward Beowulf, Cain was little more than a sinister shadow, but Beowulf's keen eyes caught the contour, and he reached out with both hands to seize him. Beowulf managed to catch his arm, wrenching roughly enough to dislocate it. Cain howled in horror, crumbling to his knees, but Beowulf did not back down. Taking Cain's arm between his two hands, Beowulf brutally broke the bone, leaving Cain wailing in woe. Beowulf knelt down next to Cain, bringing his lips to the conquered crook's ear, and said, "Gather your Grendel. Leave this place and never return. If I so much as hear of you again, you will only live to regret it." Cain, the former patron of pain, crawled from the bar, sniveling all the way. As the door subsequently swung shut, the throng thundered. The Grendel had been ground out. The Danes would finally be free of fear. Beowulf, the victor of the valiant, had truly done it, the thing that no other could do. Hrothgar ran to Beowulf, embracing him. "Brave Beowulf, you have done it! You have defeated the Grendel. How can we ever repay you?" Beowulf clapped the chief on the shoulder, laughing loudly. "The honor of a fight well fought and a defeat well dealt is a reward enough for me," Beowulf replied, boisterously enough for the room full of people to hear. More quietly, he whispered to Hrothgar, "Of course, you will be available if we ever have the need." Hrothgar's smile sagged slightly, but he vowed vigorously and called for another round. The rest of the night, and well into the next day, had the men drinking themselves nearly comatose in celebration. Beowulf, the victor of the valiant, soon returned to Geatland, filled with grandeur of glory and reasonably richer. The peace was preserved, or so for a time.